The question is always anybody you ever come in contact with is going to ask you exactly the same question. Why should I buy you versus anybody else? And that's the essence of everything in terms of getting a college degree, getting into college, getting out of college, getting your first job, growing in your career. You've got to keep answering the question. You really need to think about who you are, what your difference is. Everybody is what I call has parity superiority. Every kid has a 3.5 GPA. Either the head cheerleader or they're the quarterback on their high school football team. They've done community service. They've done everything right. The problem is everybody else has done the exact same thing.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited to have another guest on Let's Talk Careers with Miss V. If you're watching from the virtual hub, welcome to everyone. I'm super excited that you're here. If you're watching us on LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram or wherever you are in the social media world, thank you for joining us. And I hope you enjoy today's guest. I want to welcome Jack Magid, who is a career repositioning strategist. I know that's a mouthful, but I love it. I love all things careers, and I know that you will too. But Jack didn't begin as a career repositioning strategist. And today we're going to learn all about the journey of his career. Welcome, Jack. I'm super excited to have you with me today.
Thanks, Maria. I'm really excited to be here. I just want to say you do really, really important work. So I'm really impressed with what you do and excited to have a conversation.
Thank you so much, Jack. I think the work that we do is really village work. And I know people say that a lot, but I really do think it's not something that one person can do. I think we need to be doing it together. And that's why you're with me today. And I appreciate having you with me here. Jack, I could talk about so many things, and I know we've had conversations, but today we're going to focus on the young person watching or the parent watching. And sometimes parents tend to use these conversations saying it's for their kids, but I really think that they're also digesting a lot of the learning. So we're going to focus on them today. And I'm going to dive right into my very first question. I work with young people all the time. And one of the challenges that I see with my students and also with my very own children is this idea of trying to figure it out when they're really, really young. How did you make your first career decision? And as you reflect on that memory, I'd like you to tell us, if you can remember, what it actually felt like making it at that time.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting because I'm going to take a little bit of a step sideways. And I didn't choose my profession. My profession chose me. And it's a little bit of a circuitous route, but I also want to tell you a story that I think are going to resonate more with your audience and parents and kids in particular. And it's really much more relatable. And I'm going to cut to many, many years into my career. I was working at a top 10 advertising agency, one of the biggest agencies in the world. It's called Gray Advertising, $1 billion agency. Had done 2 tours of duty there. And I get a call. I worked on the United States Navy, did Navy recruiting, and I also worked on General Electric and Fruit of the Loom, three very, very high profile clients. And I had been there a while and they kind of bought my act to a certain degree. I get a call one morning to come down to HR and I go, oh my God, what did I do now? I walk in, I see the HR director who I knew very well. I see his secretary and she looks at me and I'm like ashen. She goes, it's okay, Jack, just go into Bill's office. He wants to see you. So I go in there and he looks at me, goes, sit down. I go, what did I do? Nah, you didn't do anything. You're fine. You're fine. I go, why am I here? He says, you know what? You've been at Gray a long time. You know the agency. You got a big mouth. I want you to go and do on campus recruiting at Columbia. I go, me? He goes, yeah, you. I go, Columbia? I go, I'm not an Ivy League graduate. No, no, you got a big mouth. You've been here a while. You'll be fine. I go, no, Bill, this is not me. No, no, you're fine, right? Get out of my office, go see my secretary. She'll give you the information. So I go out, I see Mary. She gives me the information. I go, what am I going to do at Columbia? Okay, that's not my world. So the date comes, I'm walking across the quad, and I say to myself, what's my opening question? Okay. The easiest question I could possibly think about is good morning, how are you? And then why do you want to get into advertising? Has to be the simplest question in the world, right? So I'm walking there and I'm getting really proud of myself and I'm saying, you know what? I've got to build up courage. I have a job. Okay. These guys are still in school. So, I got a little bit of a leg up on them. I go in there, I got 12 people's names on my list, right? I go in, good morning, Maria, how are you? And oh, great, Jack, how are you? Fine. Maria, why do you want to get to advertising? Maria, 12 out of 12 people answered the same question. Why do I want to get into advertising? Because I like working with people. I said, what? Yeah, I like working with people. I said, your parents are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's your answer? I like working with people. One person I said, as opposed to what? Dogs? What kind of answer is that? It's crazy. I literally brought one person to tears. I felt a little bit bad. Finally, somebody said to me, not in these terms, but all right, big shot, why did you get into advertising? I said, finally, somebody that's got a really reasonable request. I said, I got into advertising, and don't take this the wrong way, but I got into advertising because I can manipulate people's minds. And they said, wow, that's really a good answer. I said, you could have given me anything. Okay. Advertising is a creative environment. Okay. You need to understand how to think. You need to understand the difference in terms of each particular career and what it represents. I said, you guys must have sat together because every single person gave me the same answer. I go back to Gray. I meet with the HR director. Jack, how did it go? I told him the story. He said, you did a good job. Needless to say, not one of those people got invited to a second interview. All right. How could you want to get into any career? I like working with people. Anyway, that's kind of the starting point for me. If you're looking to do anything, you got to do your due diligence. You got to understand the environment that you're getting into and why you want to do it versus any other. So that's kind of the Columbia University story. But I was just shocked that I want to work with people. I like working with people. Anyway, that's kind of where that went. And I was kind of proud of myself. I really was.
I'm almost imagining that must have been one of the modules in their university advertising class, perhaps, of that. If you like working with people, advertising might be for you. If 12 out of 12 people said it, you never know, right? But I love that you brought the recruitment or the career fair at the university because that's where we see young people meeting employers sometimes for the very first time. Particularly in today's world, if you're lucky enough not to have to get a part time job as a teenager, that means that you don't really experience meeting employers until you kind of have to join the workforce. And I know that young people today are expected to go to university. It's almost the assumption. And whenever I've interviewed 14-year-olds, which I do often for my own research, it's always the same thing. What do you want to do when you graduate from high school? "Well, I'm going to university." And my next question is always, what makes you, think that you have to go? And they're like, well, isn't that what everybody does? So I know that there's a lot of pressure for young people to go to university because archaic mindsets remind us that going to university makes you a more competitive candidate. But employers are demanding more experience than degrees in today's world. Would you say, from your experience, that that is the case in the world of advertising? I know you're not in advertising, and we are going to talk about your current company, but would you say in today's world of advertising that that degree is a competitive edge for a young person?
It's definitely not a competitive edge. It's what I would call cost of entry. Okay. You've got to have the basics. And the basics are, everybody's got a college degree. Okay. That doesn't do one thing for you. Okay. And the one thing that if your audience takes away nothing from our conversation, take away this one word. And the one word is differentiation. Okay. And the question is always anybody you ever come in contact with is going to ask you exactly the same question. Why should I buy you versus anybody else? And that's the essence of everything in terms of getting a college degree, getting into college, getting out of college, getting your first job, growing in your career. You've got to keep answering the question, why should I buy you versus anybody else? And that's basically what advertising does. Advertising creates that differentiation. It separates you from everybody else. And it's really, really hard. It really is. It's not impossible, but you really need to think about who you are, what your difference is. And the good thing is that every single human being is different. So going in, you have that differentiation built into your DNA. You need to figure it out. And that's the hard part because everybody is what I call has parity superiority. Every kid has got a 3.5 GPA. They've all, they're either the head cheerleader or they're the quarterback on their high school football team. They've done community service, right? They've done everything right. The problem is everybody else has done the exact same thing. So what you need to do is what I do for a living is I differentiate for, many, many, many decades. I differentiated brands and companies. And now what I do, I differentiate people. And you need to figure out what that core essence of who you are and why it's different, how it fits into your personality. And the most important thing is what value are you going to give to a school or a company? So, I talk to a lot of people and I say to them exactly the same thing. Everything that we're going to talk about, and this is a very old term and I really need to update it, but in the old days, it was this is not rocket scientry. Remember that term, right? Okay, so maybe it's not AI, all right? It's not that difficult. These are really, really common sense principles. The hard part is figuring out how to answer that common sense principle or that really simple question, why you? What makes you different? Because the hard reality of college and careers and getting into your first job is exactly the same thing. Nobody really cares. Okay. It's your job to make them care about you versus anybody else.
That's a very interesting perspective. How would you go about helping a young person? Because at this stage, they're really in their own space. They really do think everyone is watching them. They really do think, that the spotlight is on them. And now we're telling them, well, listen, the interviewer is really not hyper fixated on your greatness. You've got to make them see the fit. How do you propose they go about doing that if everybody is doing the same thing?
Well, you need to know basically three things, right? Who you are. And I think you know enough about me that I'm a self-professed Fruit Loop and a bowl of Cheerios. Okay. Everything that I do is carefully choreographed to be different. And the one thing that kids have a difficult time understanding is that you need to be different. And every kid, in my experience, wants to fit in. So that's the hard part. You need to rejigger your brain to say, in this world, I need to be different because I need to make somebody care about me. I need to say, here is the value. And most importantly, the added value I can bring to your university or your job, right? So, number one, who are you? And that's who I am. I have an ability to what I call see things other people miss. I have a different perspective. So my clients for decades have said to me, Jack, I don't know how you think. How do you come up with these kind of strategies, positionings, points of views, right? That's just who I am. It's been carefully choreographed over many, many years, but I was born that way. And it took me, honestly, a long time to understand that. Clients told me that. I wasn't able to figure it out. All right. So number one, you got to figure out who you are. And you are an individual and you're distinct and you need to embrace that. Number one. Number two, what do you stand for? Okay, who are you as a human being? You've got to have a positioning in life. You've got to have a perspective. And number three, why you're different. Again, as I say, um, I'm very, very predictably unpredictable. Let me tell you one of my favorite stories when it comes to that. Again, I'm working in an advertising agency, and one of our clients is probably, I'm not sure that your universe would know this, but it was a company called Drake Bakeries. And Drake Bakeries makes snack foods, ring dings, Yankee Doodles, enrobed chocolate, right? Really, really fun stuff, great snack food. I have a meeting one morning. It was in Wayne, New Jersey, in basically the bakery, and the smell from these baked goods are just spectacular. And I always love Monday morning because they would feed us. So we're sitting there, and it's a big meeting. We're presenting a new advertising campaign. That head Drake was owned by Borden's, the big conglomerate, food conglomerate, and one of the executive VPs was there. And the brand manager's there. I'm there with the advertising agency, and we're presenting this thing, this new campaign. And the head of the executive vice president turns to the marketing director and asks him a question. And the guy, Joel, says, "I don't know." And the guy goes crazy. He goes, "What do you want? Why am I paying for you?" I'm like, "Why am I paying you? And you're incompetent." He was horrible. Really, really beat the guy up. And finally, he says, "You know what? If I'm wrong, hit me with a spoon, right?" And the room goes silent. So what do I do? He gave me the license to steal, right? I pick up what's called one of the snack foods called devil dogs, right? It was like this long piece of chocolate, enrobed in chocolate, right? I pick it up and I throw it at him. I hit him in the face and the room goes quiet. And people are like, "Oh my God, this is gonna fire Jack," right? He looks at me, he goes, "I like you, kid. You're the only one that was able to stand up to me." Right? So for me, everybody knows that I'm predictably unpredictable. I will do things importantly within my personality. There was nobody else that could have gotten away with throwing something at the executive vice president of this company. But I was able to do it because I took a chance. I said, I know within my personality, I can get away with it. Meanwhile, this guy loved me. Okay, I wound up getting so many, incredible credits going forward, building that relationship. He invited me and my team to his house. Okay, over one weekend, and gave us, basically set up a party for us, right? So that one element of me making a decision that's within my personality, knowing that I do things that are predictably unpredictable, I can get away with it. So the ability to understand who you are, and I love what you said that kids always try to fit in. They don't want to be different. You got to embrace that because people are looking for different. I don't need another anything. The only reason you're going to fit into my school or my job or my business is that you're going to bring something that nobody else can. Does that make sense?
It does, and it makes me think of a couple of things. So first, you're right, teenagers really don't wanna stand out. They're afraid of standing out and being picked on, and we see that a lot in the classroom. Another thing is we're telling them that the world is looking for them to stand out, but the education system has structured the system in such a rigid way that if you did stand out, you were called out for standing out, right? So we've got all these mixed messages with young people. Fast forward to the workplace, transformational leaders say, we're looking for you to stand out, but most leaders in an organization are actually micromanagers and they don't want you to stand out. So with all these mixed messages, Jack, how did you have the courage? I know you said it's in you, it's part of you, But we have to remember that young people kind of need the script to understand like where are the boundaries? What am I allowed to do? You know, how do I know that I can get away with it? So for you, going back to that story, everyone paused and went, "Oh no, Jack's going to get fired." But Jack wasn't thinking that. Jack was like just doing what Jack does. You know, take that tidbit and give a young person the recipe because they need to understand, how did you have the courage to do it? And how did you know that it would work, or did you?
Well, I knew it was going to work because, the guy, he turned out to be a really, really wonderful guy, but his outward persona was, he believed that strength, okay, was the management discipline that got him to where it was. And I hate saying it, but he was a bully. All right. So what do you do with bullies? Just slap them in the face and they go, "Oh my God, like you hit me." Yeah, because you're a bully, right? And bullies will never fight back. So, what's really, really hard is I tell people, you can't be Jack. God knows the world can't handle another Jack, and I can't handle another Jack. I have a hard time handling myself. So you've got to do what is within your own personality and your own comfort zone. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it says the only thing I can do is give you a perspective to say, here is what's going on. And I'm going to give you logic. And if you follow my logic, okay, hopefully you will then embrace. I can't force you to buy my act. I can't force you to buy my story. All I can do, same thing that you do, you present information. You let somebody say, if this is logical, if it accomplishes my objectives, okay, then I need to know what the elements are in the strategy to accomplish that objective. So again, I go back to a very, very logical, linear, organized, structured process to say, if your objective is X and you're implementing Z, Z is never going to work. It's X plus Y equals Z. So you either have to follow a formula that fits into your life, your personality, and what you're looking to achieve. Because, one of the greatest cliches is if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and it doesn't work, what is that? What's that definition? The definition is insanity. So I basically push people to say, you know what? Try it your way. See if it works. If it works, that's fabulous. Go for it, right? If it doesn't, and I'm going to tell you, most times it ain't going to work because I've done this for a really, really long time. And, I'm going to give you a perspective that I want you to fit in to what you're comfortable with. Out of the 10 people in that room at Drake's, there was not one single person that would ever have, it wasn't courage. For me, it was a calculated risk. I knew what I could get away with. So to answer your question, you need to understand first and foremost who you are. And let me give you kind of a piece of help on that subject. I think I have in my business Finding Next, when I meet a person, I ask them one question going in, and it's the single most difficult question for anybody to answer. I will say to them, Maria, what makes you you? Who are you as a person? It's not your CV. It's not your resume, right? And that's the mistake people always make. They tell people what they do. I don't care what you do. I only care why you do it. And the why is the end benefit. And it goes back to my original premise. Nobody cares about you. They only care what you're going to do to help them solve their problem, overcome the obstacle. So what I have, and I'm totally willing and able to offer this to your audience, I have an assessment called What Makes You You. If you go to my website, findingnext.guru, you can download it. If anybody wants to send me an email, I'll send it to them. But it's a really critical place to start. And going back to your one of your earlier comments, and I don't hate schools, I don't hate them at all, but they don't teach kids how to think. And that's the most difficult thing because once you can understand how to think through a problem and how to create that value that you have as a person, that's going to give you success. Memorizing theorems ain't going to ever work. All
Mm.
right. So that's the premise that I always start with. Understand how to think, understand who you are, understand that nobody cares. Okay. They only care about themselves. And you've got to provide that end benefit.
Love it, love it, love it. And I can see that we're coming close to the end here. I've got one question just before we say goodbye. How does an advertising guru become the founder of an organization called Finding Next? Tell us what you do and how you found your way to it.
So my advertising career, again, I was never ever smart enough, and I'm totally comfortable to admit that. Okay. I was never smart enough to articulate what I wanted to do. All right. And I backed into things upside down, inside out, backwards and forwards. And what I found was advertising really fit my personality. And I am a very logical, linear, organized, structured, disciplined person on one side of my brain. The other side is very creative and wild and lunatic and, kind of out there. And both sides came together. And what I did for advertising is called a strategic assessment, or a very, very common term, a root cause analysis, finding out what the real problem is. So in advertising, in terms of building or turning around brands, it's the same exact process. You go through that strategic assessment or that root cause analysis to figure out what the real problem is. When I was looking to find my next, I had a question that nobody could answer. And the question was, within my skill set, what else can I do? And nobody was able to answer that. And a very long story, but I woke up one day and I was meeting with some people and a light bulb went off. And I said, oh my God, the process that I use for building or revitalizing brands, I can use that exact same process to help people that are stuck in their career. So again, I was never smart enough to figure it out. I backed into it. And that's what happens to most people. It's a very, very difficult process to have a 5-year plan. One of the great quotes is that if you want to make God laugh, tell him what your plans are tomorrow. The world doesn't work that way. Okay. So embrace who you are, do what you feel is within your capabilities, within your personality, and don't worry about the yellow brick road being very, very straight. It ain't, right? Dorothy met a lot of flying monkeys. She met a wicked witch. That's what life is really about. Embrace that.
I do appreciate that take on it, but there's a long conversation that we could have about the wing it theory. But Jack, I really, really do appreciate. I agree. We have to be agile and adaptable. And if anything is coming in the next 5 years, it's unprecedented. AI is advancing to human levels and beyond. So young people today, I do think need a strategy, but I think right at the top of that strategy should be how to be agile and how to be adaptable and how to understand that life is not a plan, but having a strategy can help you feel a little more supported. Jack, we could go on forever. We could talk and talk, and I'm sure that we will again. It has been such a pleasure to have you here and share your insights. I definitely want to bring you back and talk about entrepreneurship and what you've learned because you decided to completely pivot in your career. And I know young people that are planning to begin that career are already saying, I don't want to do this for life. I will want to change what I'm doing. And entrepreneurship is always in the conversation whenever I speak with young people. So we're definitely going to have you back, but we are going to love you and leave you for today's episode. Thank you for being here, Jack. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope to see you when I bring Maria Pruna, who is the first female owner of a car wash in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, on Let's Talk Careers with Miss V. See you all soon.